Hello, everyone. Say hello. There you go. Good morning. My name is Erik Rasmussen, and as I was introduced, I am here today to talk to you about forms. Applause. There we go. Thank you. But not just any forms. Dare I say, magical kind of form known as a wizard form. Now, what is a wizard form, you may ask? Well, the definition is pretty simple. A wizard form is a form that is broken into several steps. Often there's a next button and a previous button, so the user can move between the steps. We've all used this on our online lives, where you're checking out at Amazon or you're booking a flight. It's a pretty common paradigm. So when should you use a wizard form? Well, wizard forms tend to be more complex than a single-page form, and it can be harder for the user because the fields are not all visible at one time. However, if your form is really long, then it can help the user if you can break the fields down into different pages. We've all experienced the sunk cost fallacy where you're answering an online survey and you get to question 17 and you're like, how many more questions are there? I've already answered 16 questions. I guess I'm just going to go and finish this thing. So there's a little bit of psychological manipulation that can be involved as well. But the primary reason to use a wizard form is that it can be dynamic. And what I mean by this is that you can change the shape of your form based on the values given in previous inputs. So the canonical example is if you're ordering a pizza, if you choose pickup rather than delivery, then you don't need to enter your delivery address, right? But if you do choose delivery, then it's important that you enter your delivery address if you're going to get your pizza. So how do we implement a wizard form? Well, the immediate answer that comes to my mind is an array of pages. And so when you hit next, you're going to increment your current page index, and when you hit previous, you're going to decrement it. And that's fine for simple things, but you have to make sure that your array index is within the bounds of your array. And if you want to skip a page, instead of incrementing by 1, you've got to increment by 2. And then what if a colleague 3 months from now decides that we need a new page in between those and doesn't update your increment by 2? Now your form is broken. But there is a more robust and flexible solution available to us, a state machine, where you can explicitly direct where to which page the next and previous buttons go. So today we're going to build a little form. You know those meal delivery services where they ship you a box of fresh ingredients and then you're supposed to make your own meal? We're going to build one of those, but for magic potions. So we're going to have 4 pages of inputs. We're going to have our contact info. We're going to have our ingredients that we want to order. We're going to have our delivery preference. And then we're going to have our delivery address. And then at the end, there's going to be an order completed page. And we also need to do form validation on next. So if you're on page 2 and you hit next, you shouldn't be able to go to page 3 unless your fields are valid on page 2. However, we don't want to do validation when you go to previous, because if you make it to page 3, you shouldn't have to enter in all the information just to go back to fix a thing that you did on the previous page. And lastly, the pizza example, if you choose delivery, then you should have to provide a delivery address, but if you choose pickup, then you don't. I'm going to be using my favorite state machine library today, xstate. Thank you, David. So first, let's get out a piece of paper and draw our state machine to see what it should look like, so we can agree before we even start coding. So we're going to start on our contact info page, and from there, if you hit next, you're going to go to the ingredients page, And from there, if you hit previous, you got to go back to contact info. But if you hit next, you're going to go to the delivery method page. Previous goes back. Next goes to delivery address. And previous goes back. And next goes to order completed. But if you've chosen pickup, we need to skip the delivery address step. So where are we going to keep our form values? We could keep them in XState or in React uState or something. But for this, but I'm going to choose to keep it in a form library. And you could use pretty much any form library for this. But I'm going to use the one that I wrote, React Final Form. Thank you. And what's this form library going to do for us? Well, it's going to handle the accumulation of our form values. It's going to hold them when we go between pages. It's going to handle field level validation, so we can mark some of our fields as required. And if they are invalid, it's going to block submit. It's going to block going to the next page. And as a side benefit, when it does block going to the next page, it's going to mark all of those fields as touched, so, so the errors will appear. All right, I think we're ready. Let's do some live coding. So if I switch to, all right. Okay. This is I've already sort of scaffolded our form. This is all of our inputs are here, and I've already broken them up into the 4 pages that we want: contact info, ingredients, etc. And then there's an order complete page that we're going to show at the end. So let's build our state machine. We are literally building it from scratch. There's nothing here. And when you're building, there's several ways to build a machine in XState, but if you want really strong TypeScript support, the recommended way is to use a create model. So you create this model, and a model defines the shape of of 2 things: your context and your events. Now, in XState, state and context have different meanings than they do in React. Your state is one of a finite number of possible states or modes that your machine can be in. And context is just this storage area where you can store data that you've loaded from the server, or if you're incrementing a counter, you store it there. You can think of it sort of like a Redux store. It's a place where you put your data. So because we're keeping all of our form values in React Final Form, for this particular machine, we're not going to need a context at all. So let's go ahead and create a model. And the first parameter that this is given, is this code big enough for everyone? Yeah, OK. The first parameter that we give is the initial context, which, like I said, we're not using context, so this is an empty object. And then we are going to provide our events here. And these are event creators. If you've used Redux, you're familiar with the concept of an action creator. That is a function that takes some sort of payload and outputs a JSON object that is your action that you send to your reducer. This is sort of the same thing. It's an event creator where you give it a payload, and it creates an event object that is what you send to XState. So we have 2 obvious events, right? We've got next, and that has no payload. And I'm just going to return an empty object here. This, when it actually runs, is going to create an object that looks like this. And if we had any payload in here, it would also be in there. So we've got next and previous. And those are our 2 real events for this wizard form. So now we're done with our model. We're going to now create our machine, and we can use our model to do that. Create machine. And this is where we provide our machine config, or the definition of what our machine should be. ID is not required, but I always create one, and I give it some meaningful name, because like when you're using the dev tools, you can like choose which machine to look at, and for sending messages between machines, sometimes ID is useful. So we've got our ID, and now we're going to define our states. So which states do we have? Well, for each of our pages, so we have a contact info state, and then we have ingredients, and then we have delivery, and then delivery address. And finally, order completed. Okay, so these are our 5 states that our machine is going to have. But now we need to define the transitions between them. What happens when you're in one of these states and you hit next or you hit previous, right? So if you're in contact info, if you get a next event, and notice how TypeScript is like auto-completing this for me, because TypeScript is awesome. If you get next, you go to ingredients. And we're not going to need previous, because previous doesn't make sense when you're on the first page, right? So let's go ahead and define the rest of these. On next, we're going to go to delivery. And on previous, we're going to go back to contact info, typing what I'm speaking. Contact info. If we're in delivery, on next, we're going to go to delivery address. And on previous, we're going to go back to ingredients. And on delivery address, as you can imagine, next goes to order completed. And previous is going to go back to delivery. And order completed is our final state. And so we tell xstate this by saying type equals final. And when you get to a final state, xstate understands that, OK, we're done. We can power down the machine. All right, so we've defined our state machine. Now we need to plug it in and make it like orchestrate our React. So the way you do that, you might not be surprised to learn that there is a hook for that. And we give it our wizard machine. And like many hooks, it returns a tuple. The first item in the tuple is an object that contains things like value. Value is the current state that we are in. And it also returns like context. But again, we're not using that in this scenario. But if you were like incrementing a counter or something, that's where you would get the value. And a very important second value here is the function to send events to the machine. So now we have our value, and we know what state we're in. So now it's just this nice, what is beautiful about React is this declarative UI concept. So here we say if value is contact info, then we're going to show this. And for the others, if value is ingredients, values delivery, if value is delivery address, we're going to show that. And here we're going to value equals order completed. We're going to show you, import you. And these next and previous buttons, when we're on the order completed page, we want to hide those. So we only want to show those when value is not equal to order completed. Make sense? OK, so now our form is going to only show the page that we're on. But you'll notice here that we don't have any inputs here. And that's because we're not in any state yet. Because when we defined our machine, we forgot to tell xstate which is the initial state. Xstate doesn't know. And so it's very important that you define your initial state. And our initial state is obviously contact info. So now, boom, we're on our contact info page. So when I hit next, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to try and submit the form because our next button is a type submit, and that's going to go through the HTML form, which is going to go through React Final Form, but it's being blocked because we have required fields. Just to show you, like the contact, one of these components is one of these where we've got a field from React Final Form, and we're printing out this field, and we're providing these, this validation of a required thing. And here we're printing out the error if we have one. So, fine, we'll fix this. And now when I hit next, well, nothing happens. Probably it console logged our values because we haven't actually told the machine to change anything, right? So we have to send this event to the machine. And here there are several ways we can do this. We can send an object that looks like this. That's one way. But if you are sending an event that only has a type, doesn't have any payload, xstate provides a shortcut where you can just provide a string. So that would work. But there's a better way. Because we're using the create model way of building our machine, remember those event creators that we wrote. It's going to be much more type safe and refactor safe if we use those. If we need to change the name of one of them, then our compiler is going to break. So for that, we need to use our wizard model, which we need to export. And here, we can use our wizard model now. .events.next. And remember, this is a function. And if we hover over this, TypeScript is going to tell us exactly what it's going to return. It's going to return an object that looks like this guy here. So these two lines are equivalent, but this one is the better way. So let's go ahead and plug in and connect our previous button as well. On click, send wizard model.events.previous. Look at all that auto-completion. I love it. All right, so now our next and previous buttons are going to work. It occurs to me that on the first page, we should maybe hide the previous button. So maybe we only show this if value is not equal contact info. And I have broken something down here. Line 44. Nailed it. And then I've broken this now, probably. Yes. All right. Live coding. Fun. All right. So now our previous button went away. And now, when we hit next, yes, we went to the next page. So let's, just for demo purposes, let's print out our value here of what our current state is, so we can see. So now we're on the ingredient state, and if we hit previous, well, sometimes we have to refresh because hot reloading doesn't always work. If we hit previous, then we go back to contact info. If we hit next, then we're back on ingredients. If we hit next, this is required, so we can't go there. Now we go next, we get to the delivery page. We choose a delivery and go to next. We have to choose our address and which house we're in, obviously. And then we get to our order completed page. So great, we're almost done, right? A couple things that we need to implement is our order completed page wants to know if we've chosen delivery or pickup, so that we can say it will be delivered in 15 minutes or it will, or it'll be ready. So here, this is a Boolean. And here we need to know whether or not we've chosen delivery. So how do we get at our values? Well, React Final Form in this render function here is providing our values. So we can use those. And then here we are, is delivery if values.delivery is equal to delivery. Okay, so when that's true, we know that we've chosen delivery. So the only thing that we haven't done yet is the skipping a step. And that is what we're going to do now. So the way you can conditionally choose which state you go to on an event in XState is to use what's called a guard. And a guard is just a predicate that is given the context and the event and will give you back, a true or false. So we define these down here in this other object, guards. And we're going to call this is delivery. And like I said, this is a function that takes the context and an event. If you use XState very often, you will understand that almost all the API is a function that gives you the context and the event. So here we don't need the context because we're not really using context. And our event, so for now, let's just return true while we gather our thoughts here. So our event, we need to know whether or not we are delivering. So we need to have some of the form values in here. So what if when you clicked next, it's like provided the form values that you were submitting? That might be a way to accomplish this. And another real benefit of these event creators is it allows a lot of TypeScript inference. So now I can put this at whatever key I want, but we're going to call them values. So now XState and TypeScript know that if your event is next, then you're going to have some form values in it that is that shape. So our component is going to be unhappy now, but we happen to have them right there. So now our next event has our form values that we've submitted. So down here in our guard, we can say if event.type, and see how VS Code is already telling me that type is either next or previous. So if event.type is equal to next and event.values, so already at this point, because we've done that, is type equal next, TypeScript knows that our values are defined. So if our values for delivery equals delivery. So now we have this predicate that's going to return true when we have submitted the choice for delivery. And the way we use this guard is up here. This is where we need to do the skip, right? When we're on delivery and we hit next. So rather than just a string here, we're going to return an array. And the first item is going to be target. So go to delivery address if this condition is met. And here we specify is delivery, referencing this key down here for our guard. And then you can put as many of these as you want. It's like a switch statement, sort of. And the last one is like the else. If none of these others have matched, then do that. So here we can go back and just put the string of order completed. OK. So let's see if this works. Let's refresh our page over here. So we type in our name, go next, choose a couple things. And again, we can go previous, previous, next, next. It all takes us to the right page. If we choose pickup here, we want to go directly to the order completed page, right? So we did. It worked. It says your order will be ready, not delivered. So let's run through this one more time, see if the other path works. Let's order a bunch of stuff. And here, if we choose delivery, we go to the delivery address page. And here we can type whatever. And then we get to the order completed page, and it all just works. So we've met all of our requirements. And one cool thing about using XState is, watch this. So I'm going to take the entire content of this machine file, copies of the clipboard, and I can go over to stately.ai/viz, and I can just paste it in here over here on the right, and hit visualize. Watch this. This visualizer has looked at all of this JSON stuff over here and generated a state chart of our machine. So we start in contact info, and it's actually interactive. I can click next, and now we're in ingredients. I can click previous, and it takes us back, next and next. And when I'm in delivery, I can see that next when delivery is true is going to take me to delivery address, and next when otherwise is going to take me directly to order completed. So this is a really powerful tool to not only for sharing with your team. Like maybe there are non-technical people that maybe can't read this JSON like this, and even people that can read JSON like this will understand your logic much better if you can present this as a state chart. I know there's nothing better than reviewing a PR where there's a state chart there. It's just, I get it. It's beautiful. Okay, so let's unmirror. And, all right, so we coded. All of that code, it will be available at github.com/erikras/potionocean. So what have we just done? Well, we've taken a long form and split it into smaller ones, which has eased the cognitive load on the user. And we've been able to change the flow of the form based on the answers that were given. And we're using this flexible, robust logic that if we need to add a new page at some point, it's going to be easy enough to see what needs to change to not break our form. And we've used this method that allows us to generate these state charts that is going to be easy to show in demo to other non-technical members. So wasn't this nice, this moment where we were just coding and focused on our task at hand? I built a state machine in just a few minutes. And I'm sure all of you have experienced this feeling when you're so deep in your code and you're just going back and forth, and just like the whole world drops away and you're so focused. Like it feels like you can get a whole day's work done in 45 minutes. Well, this is a sensation that psychologists call flow, and it is what professional athletes and musicians and dancers get into when they are really focused on what they're doing. So wouldn't it be amazing if there was like a spell you could cast on your own brain to get into this flow state quicker? You'd be more productive, you'd finish your work earlier, and you could go back to things that aren't coding. I'd like to mention that I've just started working at a company called Centered. And at Centered, we create this app that you run on your desktop that helps you get into this flow state. It's a little hard to understand. You really need to try it. But it really does work. It's free, and in fact, I have a special discount code only for the attendees, both in person and online, of this conference. So don't tell anyone. If you use the code SHIFT, you will get a free month of the premium version, which includes a desktop app that will nudge you away from Twitter and Slack and turn on your do not disturb mode on your Mac, so you don't even get the Slack notifications. Do please try it. I promise you'll be more productive. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, hands together for Erik Rasmussen.